The modern games industry seems to have this obsession with remaking classics and charging full price. There are plenty on the horizon such as Silent Hill 2, Splinter Cell, Resident Evil 4, and even Lollipop Chainsaw. Sometimes these end up being faithful Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2 remakes where the game is ultimately faithful to the original, improving it and adding more context and content that later entries added. Other times we get the disastrous GTA remasters with a kinda mid RE3 remake that doesn't stay faithful to the original and ends up being kinda mid or just bad. So in 2023, a year with an absolutely stacked lineup, looking at you Space Marine 2 and Armored Core, I'm happy to say Dead Space is a faithful remake that is worth your full 60 USD, and I'd argue that it is actually the perfect remake and could revive the franchise.
Brace yourselves! He's gonna smash us into the hull!
I think it's me. It's all falling apart here.
Hey, Isaac. You coming?
Where is everybody?
Up there!
This transformation, it's remarkable. Don't you want to be reunited with the people you lost? Our homecoming will be truly divine.
There's still a way out for us. But we don't have much time.
Now, if Dead Space is a remake, what's the original about? In Dead Space, you are Isaac Clarke, an engineer in way over his head on a journey to find his girlfriend, Nicole Brennan, on the USG Ishimura, a planet-cracking mining ship sent to the prohibited planet of Aegis 7 on an illegal mission. We very quickly find that the Ishimura is plagued by monsters that slaughtered and once were the crew. On top of that, the Ishimura is in shambles and falling apart. Our job is simple: fix the ship, find our girlfriend, and leave before we get torn apart and join the ranks of the Necromorphs. Dead Space 2023 is made by EA Motive, and if you don't know who they are, I don't blame you, as I had to look them up too. Motive is a decent-sized EA studio that worked on previously on Star Wars Battlefront 2 and Star Wars Squadrons. And while these are alright, EA and Battlefront 2 had me a little worried. Luckily, they have been incredibly transparent about their process of making Dead Space, and seem to be truly Dead Space fans who wanted to bring this franchise back from the dead. And they hit it out of the park with this remake. From the combat to the Ishimura itself, Dead Space feels not just familiar for the die-hard Dead Space fans, but new enough to keep you on your toes and excited to keep playing. And if you've never played Dead Space, you need to play this game. One thing that worried me about Dead Space was I thought the 2008 original looked good enough and held up and didn't need a remake, just a remaster. But boy was I wrong, because this game is downright gorgeous and I cannot imagine the Ishimura in any other way now. The team at Motive built everything from the ground up in the Frostbite engine. It is simply perfect. A quick note, this game runs amazingly now. I will admit I have a really good rig with a 3080 and a 2700X and can run max graphics with no motion blur or film grain though. I hate that stuff. But I've heard on older hardware it runs well. This is helped by the game doing what the Callisto Protocol couldn't, and that was compiling shaders before the game starts. Let it run for a few minutes and it takes a second, but it's worth it. The Ishimura feels like this old industrial futuristic mining ship that it is. You can tell that people worked and even lived here with the environment full of little details like the personal belongings and crew quarters or the abandoned workstations and medical. The ship itself feels like you are entering the belly of the beast with a lot more detail in its architectural and technical design. The high-tech screens look like actually usable and viable in this world, and even just the hallways make far more sense if you were to work here every day. Trekking through the ruined, dimly lightened, bloody hallways feels like diving straight into the deep end, and that lighting drives most of this game's vibe and is leagues ahead of the original. Don't get me wrong, Dead Space lighting is good for 2008, but with modern hardware, this is just something else. The hallways are decently lit, but still encourage me to aim my gun for a flashlight because I'm never sure is something right around the corner to sometimes jump from where you wouldn't expect it. And when it is dark. Like, look at this. Do you want to walk through this without a flashlight and your gun out slowly? Because I don't. It actually is perfect, and ironically, this is what I remember Dead Space looking like. It is actually funny how your brain remembers things like this. The other half of things touch up was character and enemy models and equipment. NPCs, corpses, and main characters all look amazing in this version, with the main characters mostly changed to look like their actors. I don't agree with any of the complaints about this. I think everyone looks perfect and more realistic in this version, and you get used to it. Yes, Isaac does kind of look like Adam Sandler, which is kind of funny, but it isn't a big deal, and I'm not opposed to this moving forward. Clothing of the crew looks like it makes sense for the department and is much better and more varied than the original. This works really well when they get turned into necromorphs, as a lot of clothes stay, and you can tell that this was in fact a person at one point. Before, they used to look like weird space suits, futuristic stuff, but now we get proper scrubs for medical or mining equipment for the miners. The suits you get were given an almost complete overhaul. The engineering suit looks the same in memory, but when you properly look at it, it is different to look more like Dead Space 2, and it's perfect. The engineering suit looks and feels like it gets more bulky as you upgrade. If you're a space engineer and wanted protection, this is it, as you feel more safe as you upgrade. Weapons are actually the only thing that weren't changed too much. They all look the same with simple visual updates to look a little more real and visible or in line with later entries. From a pure visual perspective, they look amazing and you won't tell the difference in gameplay. Necromorphs, which I'm going to give more attention in the gameplay section, are also really good here. They look like the old crew, like I mentioned before, but also are visually so much better than the original. They are the disgusting John Carpenter body horror we all remember, but just somehow even more gross looking. This is helped by the peeling system, which as you damage them, flesh and clothes just chunks off of them. Dealing damage can rip them to shreds, revealing the bone beneath, giving you a clear target to chop off. The gore is insane and perfect for the remake. Just don't look too deep at these, like the Weezer, because, man, looking at the Weezer, it's so bad. Like, when you think about it, it gets worse. I really hope no devs came out with some sort of trauma from looking up how to rip flesh apart like this, because it really is detailed. The only visual nitpick I have with this game I can even think of is that I missed the original box art. The remake's good, but it was just so iconic, it's just a shame to see it go. The animation work helps give that feeling, and it has completely changed as well. Everything feels more natural and weighty across the board. Isaac feels like he shambles across the Ishimura, starts scanning the environment. I thought I didn't like this at first, but it really is good. Stomps feel strong. Melee is visceral. Weapons feel dangerous, and the necromorphs look so much better. They don't have this run anymore, but a realish run in line with people or whatever they've become and react to getting hit and losing limbs in such a natural way. One little cool detail that I'm not sure I have footage of is if you shoot a necromorph's legs off, when they're on a crosswalk, their arms will actually get stuck and they'll be like hanging on in between the crosswalk. It's really cool. Animation of NPCs is also just as good. It wasn't stiff before, but now it honestly makes it look like that, just because it's so good here. Given that Isaac interacts with voice acting now, it helps make the scenes work. Gunnar Wright returning as Isaac to fully voice him was the one thing everyone was worried about, as he really didn't in the original, because they thought it would be more immersive for him to not speak. In my opinion, in practice, this does not really work, as he'd be asked or told things and just not respond when a normal person would.
Isaac! God, I can't believe you made it.
Isaac, we ran into more of them on the way over here. Are you okay?
More what? What the hell are those things? Is that the crew?
Here, Isaac responds where appropriate, which makes this experience even more immersive than the original, while maintaining a faithful feel.
Isaac. Oh my god, Isaac. You made it.
They're everywhere. Shen, is he,
He's gone. Nothing I can do. What the fuck are these things?
The ones I saw, some of them were wearing Ishimura uniforms.
Of course, with the game being built from the ground up and with Isaac talking, the game is completely re-recorded when it comes to the dialogue. I've heard some differing opinions when it comes to the changes, but personally, I'm a fan. The interactions with the main characters are written and acted well and delivered how you would expect, with a vibe of people being way out of their depth and rightfully afraid. Audio logs are re-recorded as well and also sound just as good, and I didn't actually notice they changed until looking them up.
What the hell is going on here? Danvers, Henderson, he's crazy. He's pulling his own teeth out. Henderson, for God's sake. Oh, God. Is he dead?
Relax. He's alive. But he hit that door pretty hard.
Man, why would he do something like that? I don't get it.
Retrieved.
We need help down in engineering. Danvers, get those wires up. Tell us to shut out. I don't want to. I don't want to. Christ, Henderson, your teeth! He's pulling his teeth out!
Just hold it! Where the fuck is security?
Ah!
Oh, God. He's dead. No, he's alive, but he hit that thing pretty hard. His own teeth. Chief, what the hell is happening? I don't know. Cancel security request. Henderson needs the medical bay. And a shrink.
I prefer the new ones as they just sound better to me while maintaining the original spacing and charm. You can tell the team at Motive had a lot of fun making these, even adding something like this.
There once was a ship from the CEC, the Ishimura USG. She cracked on the moon with gravity. Go me, bully boys, go. Huh. Soon may the Callion come to save our souls and take us home. One day when the fiction is done, we'll take our leave and go.
I grinned through the whole thing. Surprisingly, the lyrics are also pretty catchy. The only thing I nitpicked was the Valor's Commander and Dr. Kine. I do think they're good. It just caught me off guard how different they are, and I expect new players won't even notice or care. This attention and care put into the voice work is carried to the rest of the game's audio. The Ishimura being a ship with a crew slaughtered to the man and transformed into these grotesque creatures sounds like that happened. The ship is filled throughout the game with nothing but ambience and a really subtle, although sometime intrusive and annoying OST. You can hear cages hanging heavily around, the hum of ventilation systems, abandoned but active computers, and malfunctions as the ship fall apart, and ship-wide automated alerts that no one is left to hear. You really do feel like Isaac walking through the halls, alone, alert, and anxious of the monsters that want to rip you to shreds, and this massive ship you have to fix. As the game progresses and the marker influence grows, the ambience changes. You start to hear more screams and yells. Is it a survivor's last moment? An insane survivor asking for help? Or just more monsters coming to rip you to shreds? You may just find out, and the cultish ramblings and whispers you hear in your head calling Isaac's name builds this sense of paranoia in you, keeping you more on your toes and pressed to keep moving. Every sound in this silence had to be excellently recreated with purpose from the original to help deliver the survival horror feel, and it works great. Doors would open with a mechanical hiss and scree, while interacting with anything electronic like door, crates, and shop make this really good techie sound that I can't describe in words, but just sounds great and signals to the player that this is in fact something. Isaac himself sounds really alive in all of this. His footsteps are heavy, and you can hear him catching his breath from running, combat, returning, and being in zero-G. Low health, the yelling when meleeing or stomping, and his subtle heartbeat when speeding up depending on how stressed he is. This is thanks to the Alive system Motive is implemented that keeps track of how Isaac should respond based on adrenaline and stress like any person would. This actually affects dialogue too, and there are different voice lines based on if you're running and health level. There's actually a ton of stuff here that goes into it, and it is really interesting. So outside of these examples, I'll be linking the Alive system deep dive if you're interested.
What have you got on you? Is that blood?
Haley, I need you to listen. The Ishimura's overrun with the fucking monsters. You didn't hear anything?
What have you got on you? Is that blood?
Haley, I need you to listen. The Ishimura's overrun with the fucking monsters. You didn't hear anything?
What? No, the comms are still out. Isaac...
We need the Killian fixed now. Got a damage report?
Yeah, it's there. No, the comms are still out. Isaac...
We need the Killian fixed now. Got a damage report?
Yeah, it's there.
When starting the game, you can pick if you want the original game's controls or Dead Space 2 controls, which I use because I like them more. The difficulty here options are story, easy, normal, hard, and impossible. Easy and story have lower damaging enemies, and you regen health naturally over time and have a high oxygen tank. Normal's baseline damage and oxygen, and hard makes the enemies take more, deal more, and you do less. Impossible is the same as hard, but there's only one save file and it's permadeath. I personally recommend hard because I think the game is actually way more fun when it is difficult, and the game can get difficult, but play whatever you're comfortable with. Combat's also really good here, with the guns actually being recreated perfectly. Everything sounds as it should, but somehow better. The cutter sounds like a tool perfect for cutting off limbs, more similar to Dead Space 2. The contact beam now changed to be a laser, so that sounds absolutely insane. And dude, that charge shot, oh my god. That pulse rifle, dude, that thing sounds like a meaty machine, which is fitting since it's the only weapon in game that's actually designed for combat. I already mentioned Necromorph sounds great, but they really are perfect. Cutting them to bits sounds really fleshy and gross. Hearing the impact of your weapons and seeing them react is perfection. Isaac stomping for loot sounds as you remember, and throwing projectiles feels so good. Hearing that fleshy impact and that chunk of impaling into a surface. Perfection is actually how I would describe this remade gameplay of Dead Space. Everything is still here, just better. For instance, that no UI in HUD has held up, with all of your information still on you and your guns. But things like movement and actual gameplay are different. For instance, Isaac animations are completely different. It's like Dead Space 2 melee and stomp, which just looks and feels like way better in gameplay. Isaac's standard walk cycle also, as I mentioned before, looked weird at first, but you get used to it, and it feels really smooth. They also completely removed the old spacewalk system. You see, in Dead Space 1, you would walk around on these surfaces and look somewhere and do this like leap to get around. That's gone, and now we have the ladder entries, the zero-G controls, which comes with some completely new areas, and feels so much better. And here's a really cool detail: when you're out for a bit while in space, your armor might ice up. The Necromorphs you fight are dispatched in essentially the same way as the original, with a few changes. Enemy flesh now rips off their body like in Doom Eternal, and functions as a physical indicator of the enemy's health. They call it the peeling system. Remember when I said enemies react? Yeah, this is that, and it's nasty as hell. You still use the same tools and methods against them, but it just hits so different now. Using stasis to slow enemies and watch them slowly fall apart is nasty but awesome. This gives each weapon its own use and effect on them, and encourages you to try everything, which is even better now that a lot of them are revamped. The pulse rifle now bites chunks out of them as you unload onto their body and limbs, and now has the Dead Space 2 bomb instead of the weird spinny thing. The force gun knocks them and the flesh off their bodies, which looks crazy and has a gravity field as a secondary. The good old plasma cutter is the same, perfect for cutting, and even the flamethrower is actually kind of good now with its new wall. Don't get me started on the contact thing. This thing is easily my favorite weapon. Just watch. Yeah, this gun fucks. Knowing what gun you want to use in what circumstance is really important. For instance, I use the pulse rifle for stormers due to high magazine ammo count, but the flamethrower, if you prefer, is also perfect here. The line gun is great for dealing with the babies and can even one-shot sometimes. Here's an important tip. The game has Resident Evil logic, so it will drop ammo for what you're carrying. So I carried 3 weapons and had tons of ammo for most of the time for just what I like to use. Combat now also has a combat directory to send enemies at you. There are still a lot of the original spawns and enemy placements, but the game dynamically chooses what to throw at you, and for a reason. The Ishimura is now an open space like RE2, and you're free to walk around and take the tram, which used to be the end of levels, to any part of the ship. This opens a few nice things. Side quests, which gives more lore, which are actually really cool, and security access. Security access is used to get the orange lockers that you used to not be able to get, and doors for more loot and special upgrades. It needs to be this way from now on. I will not be used to unopenable orange lockers now. Even the node doors being gone is so nice. By the end of the game, I fully upgraded 3 guns and almost my suit too. So that directory takes all this into account when you visit areas to get those things. If you are doing really good, the game will throw more enemies your way. If not, you may just hear things and see a few enemies, or even just vents explode with no enemies. This is not only good to make the game feel dynamic and alive, but also adds tons of atmosphere. For instance, I was in the tram towards the end with really low health and a lot of ammo, but the thing just stopped. It sounded like something was on top and there were screams. It scared the hell out of me because I thought it was a scripted event, but nothing happened. It was really cool. There are of course new and old puzzles in this world like Resident Evil, but they are much more practical than obscure. Resident Evil has these really specific puzzles that are kind of weird, like puzzles with statues or a piano. Instead of that, Dead Space leads into the engineer theme, so the puzzles are more practical, such as replacing a tram, changing batteries for different gameplay events like darkness or life support, or recalibrating automated turrets, which are so much better than before. Spoilers from this point forward, so if you don't want any, go to this timestamp, but I will do my best to follow the main plot. The story of Dead Space still has its main themes completely preserved and almost completely unchanged out of a few details that expand this world. Isaac arrives on the USG Kellyan to find his long-distance girlfriend on the USG Ishimura, and as an emergency repair team member, only to discover it's full of monsters that wipe out half your team. You are then sent to each part of the ship to fix issues as they arise. You see, Isaac discovers along the way through the voice log that a mysterious marker on Aegis 7 was the source of whatever is happening, and a religious group known as the Unitologists believe it to be their religious salvation. This leads to the crew not working together until it was too late, meaning the ship is suffering from having no crew to fix previous issues caused by the slaughter on board and sabotage. We are first sent to medical to recover the captain's rig, because even he too is dead. You can already see a lot of the game's changes here with the addition of small details and Isaac speaking. I find it way more believable when you enter Nicole's office that Isaac makes a small and slightly desperate sounding attempt to call out to her. We get one of our first holograms, which are new and add new lore, which I really like, and the side quest makes sense too. Of course, Isaac's gonna go on a quest to at least know what happened to Nicole. Quality of life and presentation changes are really obvious if you play the original. For instance, planting the bomb here to get into the emergency ward, and the cutscene of Isaac fighting with the infector for the captain's rig. From that presentation point, this is way better than the original, because you will now know what the captain's face looked like for the latter video log and hologram he's in. The next section has Hammond tell us to return to the bridge to get a read on the ship. We also get the news that Hammond was aware of the marker from Kendra, but he says he only knows limited things about it. Here we get to see Hammond's plot changes. That necromorphy trapped before is now Chen in this version, and he is hesitant to kill it, so he launches it away. Oh boy, this could never have repercussions. Like the original, we are sent to fix the ship's engines and run into the brute, which is still really good here. On the way to fix the ADS cannons, we get a new audio log. This is one of the new lore pieces that specifically mention the other Dead Space media. This specifically is Dead Space Downfall and the security team we follow.
Wait, for Christ's sake, step away from the controls. We need our first officer. Captain Matthias is dead.
The captain's dead? Vincent's security team is dead?
Rerouting power to the ADS cannons is the same, but the cannons are not. You just aim your guns, and the ADS will follow and shoot when you press the button. Way better than the early 2010s turret section before that one-shot you. One thing that is already making itself apparent again is how good the storytelling here is in Dead Space. The story told with what you experience here is really, really good, but this game really shines with the audio, video, and text logs. I really love games that let you naturally discover what happened to the location you are in, and the game does just that. Progressing gives you plot of what happens in the specific section. So for instance, in medical you see the medical team trying to figure out what the necromorphs are and diagnosing issues in those affected. And in engineering, the crew attempt to prevent the ship from falling apart in the mess they're in. If you haven't noticed changes yet, Lethal Devotion is the chapter where it really is obvious. First of all, we get this totally not spliced together footage of Nicole and need to go there to make a poison to fix an air issue in hydroponics. Making our way to medical, we get a completely different plot with Mercer. In the original, Mercer immediately is going on a religious threat at you, and you find him and he releases the hunter. In this version, Mercer was luring people in medical to experiment on them, and is much more subtle with his plans. The medical deck here is also different, with new bodies that look recently experimented on, and the necromorph flesh infecting the area, which was there before but looks way better here. I really like this new addition because it makes it feel like the Ishimura is in fact changing as we go along. Moving forward, we find the signal. Man, I wish we had that stasis what is that, bro? This is the official introduction to Mercer and is actually in the same place and ends the same way as the original, with you encountering the hunter. Dr. Mercer here, I will say, is much more interesting in my opinion in this version of the game.
Clark. All right. Dr. Brennan's nearest and dearest. We were colleagues, you know. Dr. Chalice. Mercer.
His voice acting is much better here, and the side quest you follow is really interesting from a lore perspective, as you get to see his experiments on Harris and attempts to understand the marker. Leaving, we actually get introduced to the poison mechanic here with a brand new effect to go with it. It functions the same way, but it at least looks more interesting here, as the fog adds some interesting gameplay, because sometimes enemies can hide in it. Moving on, Isaac acquires what's needed to make the poison, and we encounter the hunter again in cryogenics. The fight hasn't changed, but it's still good here. This actually does bring up one of my very few complaints with Dead Space Remake. I feel like the hunter was a missed opportunity. With the open map, I feel like having the hunter be like a Mr. X who hunts you down would have been really cool with how the world works now, but it's really not a big deal. Moving on to hydroponics, we see a lot more changes that make the experience better and different. First of all, Hammond isn't here and went to crew deck instead. Instead, we run into Dr. Elizabeth Cross. This section we are guided by her and Daniels through what is essentially the same process as the original. We have to go kill Cross's team, now turned into Weezers. I actually like this because it adds a more personal feel to putting down the Weezers for Cross, and a more human feel.
Hydroponics. I need to record their names. Hidaka, Holly, Annabelle, Mark. So many. I don't know how much gas they took in. I just saw them change. That crack when their lungs burst out like flowers.
This works really well with Hammond and Kendra too. Each section you get with them feels way more personal now that you can talk, and you can feel the relationship with them more as it hits harder when something does happen to them. Moving through hydroponics, we learn that the giant mass is what is growing and affecting ship, and it looks so much better in this game. In the original, the mass was kind of mid, it didn't look great, but here it looks otherworldly and nasty growth. It is pretty amazing how they managed to completely improve and preserve the visuals of some areas without losing the effect it had. I also like the small changes in the area, that the Weezers have an actual animation of the poison, and the Zero-G section is far better here with the changes. The boss fight at the end of the section is still pretty fun with Zero-G as well, and I really liked and preferred over the original. What we have next is one of my favorite sections of the game, the mining deck, and it got a almost complete overhaul. One of my favorite parts of this is you can actually choose what floor to explore after getting to the deck. Complete side note, but Isaac feels like an actual curse sometimes. It feels like every time you walk across somebody, they just die, or you see their last moments. It's kind of sad. It makes me wonder too, since we rerouted power from mining to the cannons and the survivors went to mining, did we kill anyone or what was left of the people here by accident without knowing? We may never know, but the side quests here and audio logs tell a story of a team barely holding on, such as Jacob Temple's story. The goal here remains the same. Attach an SOS beacon outside the ship in order to have a signal that can reach due to the Ishimura sabotage. With this much better puzzle, we finally get the signal out. The USM Valor shortly responds, relaying that they picked up the pod with Chen in it from earlier. When I first played Dead Space, I thought this was kinda dumb, 1 in a million chance, but it makes sense that an escape pod probably has a beacon in it. Our next goal is to fix the communications array, because of course it would be broken too. We get here an actually pretty neat puzzle. I really like how Zero-G is using this, so it's pretty fun. In my opinion though, the part that shines is the boss here. The Leviathan is completely different here, and for the better. It used to be yet another turret section, but here it's an actually somewhat challenging fun boss fight. This here though is one thing I actually prefer in the original.
USM Valor, Commander Daniel from USG Ishimura, come in! Do not open the escape pod! Damn it! Spawn!
Finally! USM Valor, this is Kendra Daniels on the USG Ishimura. Do not open the escape pod. Repeat, do not open that escape pod. Do you read?
The message from the Valor in the original is better shot in my opinion, but it's still a good scene. The Valor itself is a great set piece and location in this version of the game. Fun fact, this is another one of my favorite parts of the game in both versions, so I'm really happy it was done justice. Hammond's character arc leads here and is done just as well and better. I really like how Hammond has changed from someone dedicated to completing the mission, based on the guilt of losing a squad, to change and realize that he just has to leave and save who he can, damn the consequences. Chen now being the necromorph makes this really good too. The Valor was sent here in this version with a nuke which we have to disarm and fully prepared for combat. Going through this ship is the same with a few tweaks and changes to fit the remake gameplay. They even kept the shooting range, which was different from how I remember. The story, however, is slightly different. The Valor's crew went through a few checks and made sure they were ready for the mission, and knew that the marker would be there, as well as the infection. This might explain the lack of unitologists riding in the ship compared to the original. It's honestly kind of tragic that the soldiers might have been able to hold the line and survive if they didn't crash. That flood of necromorphs seemed to have just been the downfall of the ship on top of being unprepared for Chen. Singularity cores our goal here so we can fix the executive shuttle Hammond found in crew decks and leave using it. Hammond's arc comes to an end here in a much different manner. I actually prefer this over the original. He still dies, but in a way that's better for his story with Chen. With Chen being the cause and sacrificing himself so you can get away, essentially.
Chen? No. You're what killed him.
Oh God.
Quarantine lockdown disengaged.
Side note, I am obsessed with the knowledge that some of the crew might have made it out to the Mishimura and could be some of the screams we hear. I love that the game lets you imagine those scenarios in your head. These last few sections were remade really well here. There are, however, a lot of changes. The deck itself is so good in this version. New hardware and design makes this area look gross where it was before, but also make it feel more like the crew actually lived here. We also dropped the kind of gamey objective of finding keycards in exchange for just trying to get access to the shuttle so we can fix it. Upon entering the decks, we can immediately see that a large portion of the crew killed themselves out of their religious beliefs. Given how many bodies here and Marsh's sermons and call to action, what happened here? Did we just miss a fight between a believers and non-believer? We will never know. Mercer's story continues here with you being able to access his room, finding out he had a much more control than we thought. Harris is in fact the hunter, which we believed before but confirmed along with the story, and some unintentional blame may fall upon Nicole. This is Jacob Temple's end. A massive departure from the original given how he was similar to Isaac and how far he made it, and his tenacity. It's actually fitting he was used like Isaac was in Dead Space 2. Except he doesn't make it. Somehow missing this shot? Speaking of Isaac, we also learned his family was killed by his mother in a religious rant. This adds much more needed context to Isaac's hatred of Unitology and why he's even here. I'm glad this was put in as a side quest because if you didn't want Isaac to be as much as a character due to the immersion, this kinda helps, even though I disagree with that argument. Moving along, we see our new hazard. Instead of grabbing parts, we got Weezers to kill him while avoiding the hunter. Honestly, a really cool part that kind of felt like RE2 Mr. X. Of course, Z-Ball makes its triumphant return and was really fun. There's actually one massive complaint I have with this remake that is in this part. Kyne's a really good character here if it's your first time meeting him, and he has believable motivations. He tries to keep Mercer busy while you agree to take the marker down and kinda gives me a less damaged Strauss vibe. However, that's my issue. It's not that he was deranged in the original, but more distraught with the reality of his faith being a lie and what he's done. He is pissed when you meet him and he goes on rants. You can believe this guy sabotaged the ship.
Don't lose hope. At first, I lost hope. I tried to scuttle the ship, sabotage the systems. But Amelia, she changed things. The church, they think the marker is divine, but they don't know what's happened here, what's been released. Look. Look at this.
Remember, we spoke on the Valley.
If you're real, let me in. I need to destroy that cluster behind you.
Not yet. Escape on that shuttle and you'll kill us all. When they took the marker from Aegis 7, it woke the being in the core of the planet.
Here, I don't see it as much. He just doesn't feel like the same person from Downfall or the original to me. This isn't bad, it's just different. And I think a few more logs might have helped with this, but it still really is good. I really like how Kenta reacts to him as well. I'd probably react the same way, I won't lie. Our final confrontation upon finding the ship with the hunter is mostly the same. We have to drag him into the engines and set him on fire to set them off to kill him. If you did the quest, you get a voice line about giving him Harris peace, which I really liked, but also Mercer meets us in here opposed to a suicide in the original. I've seen arguments saying why the original is better, but personally I like this one more. I prefer how Mercer actually seems enraged by her actions against him, and the marker shows its true face by not caring for him at all and only using him. The next chapter, which is the cargo bay, is essentially the same. We have to move the marker onto the ship so we can take it planetside. There's this nice little combat section, which isn't hard at this point because you have so much ammo, but it's a fun challenge. Finally, we reap our escape, and Kendra finally shows her true colors. One thing about that in this version, I actually believe her. Kendra seemed to actually care about you and Hammond in this version much more. So I feel like this will hit harder for newer people to the franchise. She gives her little monologue which still explains why the Valor was here in the first place, and I actually believe it was for the same reason as her caring. I personally believe she might feel like she owed it to us. We worked with Nicole to get the ship remote controlled back and board with her. Yeah, this totally is in dialogue for No Way Back for sure. In the finale, we reach the source of all of this evil, Aegis 7. The feeling of getting planetside after being stuck in the Ishimura the whole time feels absolutely amazing, but final. The objective here is the same. Move the marker into position before that rock in the Ishimura finally crashes into the planet to put the hive mind to sleep. The extra lore here you can find is great if you're really into Dead Space. There is now a text log mentioning the team from Dead Space Extraction who were sent on Vincent, the main character from Deadfall's orders. There's also this audio log.
Ram Newman, PSEC evacuation report. The shuttle's gone. Took off and then crashed right back down into the bay. Took a whole crowd with it. Must be 100 people dead. We've lost the rest of the shuttles. God help us. There's no way out. Anyone hearing this, do not land. I repeat, do not land on Aegis 7. Fuck the Ishimura.
If you don't know Newman, he's the main character from the Dead Space comic, and is directly talking about events from it. I really appreciate how they added all this lore to the game without affecting what the Dead Space was originally. Everything feels like it belongs and not shoehorned in. This, however, is a big departure. Cross was Nicole, and explains where she went off to. This twist is really good and I love it. It was completely unexpected for me, but in a good way. Kendra's death following this hits way harder in this version, while still being less brutal. It fits this version of Kendra and is a good motivation. I feel like her at the end still not wanting to hurt Isaac, that she really did care about him. The Hive Mind is a really fun final boss after that. There are some minor changes like with the toxic spit, but you fight it in the same way. The end of the game is the same, but this time with the jump scare isn't nearly as good. I don't know if it's bad, or it's bad because I expected it. We also have a second secret ending added to the game that you unlock by collecting these markers around the game on a second run. It is way more creepy and makes an interesting case to be the true ending leading to Dead Space 2. And if you're wondering, yes, the chapters still spell out Nicole is dead, which blew my mind years ago. So yeah, Dead Space 2023 is the most faithful and perfect remake you could possibly produce, with plenty of love from the development team. Even though it's a new team, they've managed to capture and replicate that signature. This game is perfect for newcomers to the Dead Space franchise and die-hard Dead Space fans alike, with faithful and quality additions where needed that make the experience better. If you've played before and don't have the money for a full-price remake, and you honestly don't need it, the game, but I highly recommend it. As the game is really fun, and with how recent games have been, I've really missed that feeling. And with the team as excited for Dead Space and hopefully decent sales numbers, I really hope we get the rest of the Dead Space games. Dead Space 2 really just needs a remaster with a few gameplay changes, but completely changed 3 in my opinion. It's just not good and killed the franchise when it came out. And if you want a pipe dream of mine, remaster Dead Space Extraction for Remake DLC, please. Hey, thanks for sticking to the end of the video. I really liked my time with Dead Space. It was honestly amazing, and I still cannot recommend it enough. I've missed this franchise so bad. I plan on going into BioShock 2, and then finally on to Resident Evil 4 Remake after this. I'm super excited for that, by the way. College is ramping up, so I will try to get my one video a month done, hopefully. But if you want to keep up with me, I semi-regularly post what's up on Twitter, and you can contact me there as well. Stay safe. Catch you later.